They told you Phuket was thriving. Record recovery numbers, resorts reopening, the island paradise back to pre-pandemic glory. Officials keep celebrating tourist arrival statistics and talking about sustainable growth. But here's what they're not telling you. Walk through Phuket outside peak season and entire resort complexes sit empty. Hotel occupancy rates in shoulder and low seasons have dropped to 35 to 45%, down from 70% just 5 years ago. And the resorts that do have guests are offering discounts of 50 to 60% off rack rates just to fill rooms. This isn't a temporary soft patch. This is structural oversupply meeting declining demand, and it's creating a crisis that's quietly devastating the island's tourism economy. And if you think empty resorts don't affect you as a tourist, or you're wondering why Phuket keeps building more hotels while existing ones sit vacant, buckle up because what's actually happening on the ground is far worse than anyone wants to admit. Let's start with the numbers because they tell a story that completely contradicts the official narrative. In 2019, Phuket had approximately 90,000 hotel rooms across all categories from budget hostels to ultra-luxury resorts. Occupancy averaged around 70 to 75% year-round, spiking to 85 to 90% during high season from November through March. Hotels were profitable. Investors were happy. The system worked. Fast forward to 2024, and Phuket now has over 110,000 hotel rooms. That's 20,000 additional rooms added during and after the pandemic. But here's the problem. Tourist arrivals haven't recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and more critically, the length of stay has decreased significantly. In 2019, the average tourist stayed 7 to 9 nights in Phuket. In 2024, that's dropped to 4 to 6 nights. So you have more rooms competing for fewer total bed nights. The math is brutal. During high season, November through March, occupancy looks reasonable at major resorts, maybe 65 to 75%. Not as good as 2019, but acceptable. But during shoulder and low seasons, April through October, occupancy craters. Industry insiders report that many resorts are running at 30 to 40% occupancy during these months. Some properties, particularly those in less desirable locations or older facilities, drop to 20 to 25% occupancy. At those levels, resorts aren't just unprofitable. They're hemorrhaging money every single month. Fixed costs continue, staff must be paid, maintenance is required, utilities run, but revenue is a fraction of what's needed to cover expenses. One resort manager told me his property needs minimum 55% occupancy to break even. They haven't hit that number in 18 months outside of the December to February peak. They're surviving on reserves and owner investment, not operational profit. Now, before you say 40% occupancy isn't that catastrophic, let me explain why hotel economics make this absolutely devastating. Hotels have massive fixed costs that don't decrease just because occupancy is low. Mortgages or land leases must be paid whether the hotel is 20% full or 80% full. Property taxes remain constant. Insurance doesn't change. Core staff salaries continue. Utilities, security, basic maintenance, these costs are largely fixed. The break-even point for most hotels is around 50 to 60% occupancy, depending on the property. Below that, you're losing money every single night. And the longer you operate below break-even, the deeper the hole gets. At 30 to 40% occupancy, a hotel might be losing 1 to 2 million baht per month. Over 6 months of low season, that's 6 to 12 million baht in losses that must be covered by high season profits or owner capital injections. But high season profits are also compressed because of oversupply. When you have 110,000 rooms competing for tourists even during peak season, price competition is fierce. Hotels' discount rates, offer package deals, include extras, anything to fill rooms. So high season profitability that used to compensate for slower low season has also decreased. The result is year-round struggle. Many hotels are barely surviving. Some are failing entirely. You see this in visible ways. Resorts that have closed entire wings or buildings, keeping only a portion of property operational to concentrate guests and reduce costs. Properties advertising positions for months because they can't offer competitive salaries and talented staff leave for better opportunities. Maintenance being deferred because there's no money for upgrades or repairs. And increasingly, hotels simply closing permanently, unable to sustain continued losses. One industry analyst estimated that 15 to 20% of Phuket's hotel inventory is effectively zombie properties, still operating but financially unviable, surviving only through owner subsidies or delayed debt payments. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about why developers kept building even as the market showed clear signs of oversupply. The answer is a toxic combination of speculation, misaligned incentives, and willful blindness. During the pre-pandemic boom, Phuket looked like a gold mine, tourist arrivals growing annually, hotels profitable, property values appreciating. Developers saw dollar signs and launched projects aggressively. But construction timelines meant many projects approved in 2018 and 2019 didn't complete until 2021, 2022, or even 2023, long after the pandemic revealed fundamental market changes. By that point, developers had invested millions and couldn't stop. They had to finish and open to try to recoup investment. But the market they completed into was completely different from the market they planned for. Worse, new projects continued being approved and launched even after it was obvious there was oversupply. Why? Because the incentives are wrong. Developers make money from construction, not operation. They build, they sell units to investors, they move on to the next project. If the hotel fails operationally, that's the investor's problem, not the developer's. Local officials approve projects because they generate construction jobs and tax revenue in the short term, even though long term they worsen oversupply and damage existing hotel owners. And landowners are incentivized to develop because land with a hotel generates more value than undeveloped land, even if the hotel isn't profitable. So everyone in the development chain benefits from building, while operational viability is somebody else's problem down the line. This creates a tragedy of the commons where individual actors pursuing their interests collectively destroy the market. The most egregious example is hotel condominiums, a model where individual units in a hotel are sold to investors with promises of rental income and property appreciation. The developer gets paid upfront from unit sales. Investors are promised 6 to 8% annual returns from rental pool revenue. It sounds great until you realize the math often doesn't work. The number of hotel condo projects needed to generate promised returns would require occupancy rates and room rates that don't exist in current market conditions. So investors buy units expecting passive income. The hotel opens and occupancy is poor because the market is oversaturated. Rental pool revenue is a fraction of projections. Investors receive maybe 2 to 3% returns, not the promised 7%. And that's before fees, maintenance costs, and property taxes. Many investors are subsidizing their investment, paying more in costs than they receive in rental income. But the developer already got paid. The units were sold. Whether the hotel succeeds operationally is no longer their concern. This model has flooded Phuket with hotel inventory that exists primarily to enrich developers, not to serve actual market demand. It's financial engineering masquerading as tourism development. Now let's talk about what empty resorts actually mean for tourists, because this isn't just an investor problem. Empty resorts change the entire character and quality of Phuket as a destination. First, service quality declines when occupancy is low. Hotels operating at 30% occupancy/staff to minimum levels. The ratio of staff to guests drops dramatically. This means slower service, less attention, longer waits for everything from check-in to restaurant orders to housekeeping. The experience feels understaffed and neglected because it is. Hotels can't afford proper staffing when revenue is so low. Second, facilities close or reduce hours. Hotel restaurants might only open for breakfast or have severely limited menus. Spas reduce hours or close entirely on slow days. Beach clubs shutter. Kids clubs discontinue. Fitness centers have equipment that breaks and doesn't get repaired. When hotels are barely surviving, they cut everything non-essential. Guests pay full price for amenities that aren't fully available. Third, maintenance gets deferred. Paint peels, landscaping gets overgrown, pool tiles crack and don't get replaced. Furniture wears out. The property starts looking tired and neglected. This happens gradually, but after 2 or 3 years of low occupancy and deferred maintenance, resorts that were pristine start showing visible deterioration. Fourth, the vibe is depressing. There's something sad and eerie about staying in a huge resort that's 70% empty. Walking through deserted corridors, eating in a restaurant with 2 other tables occupied, swimming in a pool alone. It doesn't feel like vacation. It feels like you're visiting a failing business. The energy and atmosphere that makes resort stays enjoyable requires other guests. Empty resorts lack that entirely. Fifth, businesses around resorts suffer. The restaurants, massage shops, tour operators, and vendors that exist to serve resort guests lose revenue when occupancy drops. Some close. Others cut quality. The ecosystem around resorts deteriorates, which further degrades the tourist experience. One tourist from Japan described staying at a large resort in Kata during the low season and finding it genuinely depressing. The resort was beautiful architecturally, but with 80% vacancy, it felt like a ghost ship. Restaurants were closed except for breakfast. The beach club was shut. Spa was closed. She spent her vacation in a gorgeous but lifeless resort and left feeling she'd wasted money. She said she'd never return to Phuket during low season and was rethinking whether she'd come during high season, given how clearly the island was struggling. Here's what's particularly insidious. The resort oversupply problem compounds every other issue Phuket faces. When resorts are struggling financially, they cut corners in ways that hurt guests. Food quality declines as hotels use cheaper ingredients. Staff training is minimized, leading to poor service. Safety inspections and maintenance get deferred, creating actual risks. Hotels become desperate for any revenue, which incentivizes participation in scams or allowing scammy tour operators to access guests. A financially healthy hotel can afford to police quality and maintain standards. A desperate hotel trying to survive takes money wherever it can get it. The oversupply also destroys pricing power. When a tourist can choose from 50 available resorts in the same area, hotels must compete on price. This leads to race-to-bottom pricing, where profits evaporate, but hotels can't raise rates because they'll lose what little business they have. One hotel owner described it as a death spiral. We have to lower prices to compete, which reduces revenue, which forces us to cut costs and quality, which makes us less competitive, which requires further price cuts. There's no way out except occupancy increases that aren't happening. Now let's talk about why this matters beyond Phuket's hotel industry. The resort oversupply is a symptom of deeper problems that threaten Phuket's entire tourism model. First, it reveals that Phuket's tourism is unsustainable at current levels. The island built capacity for 15 to 20 million visitors annually based on growth projections that assumed continuous increases. Those projections were wrong. Tourism growth has stalled or reversed. Climate change impacts, air quality concerns, political instability, economic pressures, shifting travel preferences, all of these factors mean the endless growth model is broken. But Phuket keeps building, as if growth will continue forever. Second, the oversupply shows that investment decisions are disconnected from market realities. Developers keep building not because there's demand, but because they can profit from construction regardless of operational outcomes. This misallocation of capital is economically destructive. Resources going into hotels that will sit empty could have been invested in infrastructure, environmental protection, or other sectors that actually create long-term value. Third, empty resorts are environmental disasters. A huge resort uses enormous resources, water, energy, land to construct. Then it sits 60% empty, continuing to consume resources while providing minimal economic benefit. The environmental footprint per guest is astronomical when occupancy is low. Phuket would be better off environmentally with fewer, fully occupied resorts than with an excess of half-empty properties. Fourth, the resort oversupply attracts lower-quality tourists. When hotels are desperate, they take anyone willing to pay. This means they can't be selective about guest behavior or market positioning. Quality tourists who want to stay at well-run, properly occupied resorts that feel vibrant choose other destinations. Phuket gets stuck with price-sensitive tourists and whoever is willing to accept the reality of half-empty resorts. Fifth, the oversupply creates financial instability that will eventually trigger a crisis. Many hotels are surviving on debt forbearance, owner capital injections, or creative accounting. At some point, lenders will demand repayment, owners will stop subsidizing, or hotels will simply run out of cash. When that happens, you'll see a wave of defaults and bankruptcies. Property values will crash. Lenders will foreclose. There will be a correction, and it will be painful for everyone involved. The question is not if this happens, but when. Some analysts think it's already beginning. Others believe it's 2 to 3 years away. But everyone agrees the current situation is unsustainable. So what should happen to fix this mess? Let me be blunt, because the solutions are obvious but politically difficult. First, stop all new hotel construction immediately. Put a moratorium on new tourism accommodation development until occupancy rates recover to sustainable levels. This will outrage developers and landowners, but it's necessary. Building more rooms when existing ones sit empty is economic insanity. Second, incentivize conversion of failing hotels to other uses. Resorts that are unviable should be converted to residential, office, or mixed-use developments. Government could provide tax incentives or streamlined approval processes for conversions. This reduces hotel inventory and puts properties to productive use. Third, allow zombie properties to fail. Stop extending debt forbearance and propping up hotels that should close. Let market forces work. Failed resorts get foreclosed, sold at distressed prices, and either repurposed or relaunched under new management with realistic expectations. This is painful short-term, but necessary for long-term health. Fourth, improve occupancy through quality enhancement rather than price cuts. Invest in what actually attracts tourists. Cleaner beaches, better infrastructure, stricter scam enforcement, environmental protection. A smaller number of hotels operating at healthy occupancy is better than current situation of too many hotels barely surviving. Fifth, encourage consolidation. Large chains with economies of scale might take over multiple failing independent properties and operate them efficiently. This reduces total number of operating hotels while maintaining the rooms that actually have demand. But here's the reality. None of this is happening. Officials keep approving new developments. Banks keep extending debt. Hotels keep cutting prices and quality rather than addressing oversupply. The problem continues worsening because no individual actor has incentive to stop. Developers profit from construction. Officials like short-term construction jobs and tax revenue. Banks don't want to recognize bad loans. Hotel owners hope something will save them. Everyone's waiting for someone else to fix the problem while actively making it worse. It's a collective action failure that will continue until external shock forces adjustment. That could be a major developer bankruptcy that cascades through the lending system. It could be a hotel workers' strike over poor wages and conditions. It could be an environmental disaster that exposes how fragile the island's infrastructure is. It could be a viral video that destroys Phuket's reputation globally. Something will eventually force a reckoning. The question is how much damage accumulates before that happens. Meanwhile, tourists visiting Phuket encounter an island that feels increasingly desperate and declining. Empty resorts, struggling businesses, declining service quality, deferred maintenance, all visible signs that something's wrong, and savvy travelers notice and choose other destinations, which worsens occupancy, which creates more empty resorts. The cycle continues. Here's what's truly tragic. Phuket has extraordinary natural assets. The limestone karsts, turquoise waters, white sand beaches. These are world-class resources. The island could support a thriving, sustainable tourism industry if it was managed properly. But proper management requires limiting growth to sustainable levels, prioritizing quality over quantity, investing in infrastructure and environmental protection, and accepting that endless expansion isn't possible or desirable. Instead, Phuket chose short-term greed over long-term sustainability. Build more, charge more, cut quality, chase volume, maximize extraction. And now the bill is coming due. Empty resorts everywhere are just the most visible symptom of a system that's fundamentally broken and getting worse. Have you noticed empty resorts in Phuket? Have you stayed somewhere that felt half empty and depressing? Let me know in the comments. And if analysis that looks at what's actually happening, rather than just repeating official narratives, matters to you, smash that like button and subscribe, because these are the stories that need to be told, the ones that show what's really going on beneath the surface. See you in the next one.